I had a thought the other day. So I was thinking about what it means for a guitar player, no matter what level they're at, to get better and to feel like they've mastered the level that they just came from. What does it mean to go from an okay guitar player to a good guitar player? What does it mean to go from a good guitar player to a great guitar player? I think I might have the answer. Let's talk about inversions. So inversions are going to be one of those things that you hear a lot of people talk about, but you might not actually know what they mean or where they come from or why they even work. So let's figure out what we're talking about. So if you take a basic major chord that's made up of the one, the first note in the key or the scale, and then the major third, that's going to be the third note in the scale, and then the fifth note in that scale on top. So a G major is going to be made up of a 1, which is going to be a G, the major third, which is going to be a B note, and then that fifth on top, which is going to be a D. So what does an inversion mean? That basically just means that we flip around the order of those three notes. So instead of having the normal 1, 3, 5, we could have a 3, 5, 1, where the third is on the bottom, the fifth is in the middle, and the 1 is on top. You can go even further and have a 5, 1, 3 inversion with the fifth on the bottom, the 1 in the middle, and the third on top. But why does this all matter? So everyone I know has had a story of coming into maybe a weeknight rehearsal or even a Sunday morning, knowing your parts, you've nailed everything, you've got that solo that you're looking forward to, and maybe the second or third song. You've got everything nailed down and you're ready to go. But the worship leader comes in, maybe their vocals aren't feeling so good, and they want to throw a key change at you. This might normally work. Maybe you just drop it a whole step and move everything down 2 frets. But what if you go from the key of G to the key of F? Now the geometry of everything has changed. You can't play those same shapes in G as you can in F, so you've got to switch things up. So what do we do? Reason number one as to why inversions are so important is they give you the flexibility to handle those key changes on the fly. And they give you a home base to land on even when you weren't expecting to play in that key. This allows you to feel like you're actually playing guitar as opposed to playing parts. You can move them around and understand how they work and not be frozen when those parts move. Reason number two why inversions are so important, they allow you to map out the entire fretboard and visualize where everything lives in any given key. Let's say we take the key of A. I can look at a guitar now and understand where my position 1, my position 2, and my position 3 live. So I know where all of my home bases are. So even if I get stuck, I know where I can land and make it work. What this allows you to do is to lock into some of those home bases and always land in a chord and in a shape that's going to work no matter the song. Reason number three why inversions are so important is you can adapt super quickly to the rest of the band. Maybe it's one of your lucky weeks where you actually do have another guitar player on stage. If you want to hand everything on the rhythm side off to them, or even everything on the lead side to them, you can be the one that's actually flexible enough to cover whatever ground is left. Or maybe if you have a piano player that comes in, or a keys player, and they're taking a lot of the lead lines, or maybe they're taking some of the lower range, you can adapt and fill out the part of the mix that still needs to be covered while still letting them do their thing. So a couple things that are going to be really important and key to understanding these inversions. Number one is going to be knowing your low E string and your A string backwards and forwards up to the 12th fret. The reason this is so important is it actually is going to help us find a lot of where these triads and inversions live. So without any context, they're going to be hard to find and hard to make sense of. Having those two strings memorized is always going to give us a strong foundation to pick these out in the middle of a song, or to know where we can land for writing some lead lines on the fly. The second thing that's going to be really key before we dive into these shapes is understanding just the basic major scale and maybe some of the Nashville number system on top of that as well. When I use numbers like 1, 3, or 5, which is the three main ones we're going to be inverting and throwing around, it's really key that we understand what that means in the context of the major scale. So if you're not super familiar with that, maybe go check that out. So this will sound a lot more familiar. So that's everything I've got to get us going. Let's go ahead and jump into shape number one. All right, so let's go ahead and get into shape number one. This is going to be where the 1, we're going to be in the key of A, where the 1 of the key is going to be on the bottom or the lowest string, and the major third is going to be next, and the 5th is going to be on top. And the way that we find this triad is actually just to go straight to our standard E form bar chord. That'll be this shape right here. A lot of people maybe still play those, and maybe this can be kind of a segue to move away from the full-on bar chords and get to some cleaner sounding triads and inversions that might sound a little bit better in a full band mix. A lot of the times when we have the full chords, they'll interrupt some of the keys, and especially the more mid-range tones from bass as well. So my approach is to just stick in my range as a guitar player and let the bass player do what they do best, and let keys kind of take some low end if they need to as well. So let's go ahead and find that shape again, just our A major shape. And so we will go ahead and play that. So what we're gonna do is find the 3 strings in the middle of that shape on the D, G, and B strings. So instead of the full 6, we're gonna have just these 3 right here. All right, so we can hear that sounds pretty neutral, pretty natural. And this shape 1 is gonna be the most neutral sounding triad of the 3. You'll hear in shape 2 that it actually sounds a little bit thicker, and then shape 3 is going to sound more like a power chord, sound really punchy and all of that. But our first shape is going to be the most neutral, so it works almost anywhere. And again, we can find our root from this just from that E form. So if we've got our A here, then our A triad is going to be right here. For a 4 chord, what we can do, which is going to be a D in the key of A, is just really play a 1 sus chord, which would look like this. And all I'm doing on that is taking this 3 note right here and adding my pinky to that to make it the 4 note. Sounds super clean. You can also find a 4 chord. If we were going back to the typical bar chord approach, you've got your 1 here. And then you've got a 5 bar chord here, or a 4 bar chord here. So you could also go. That's more of a true 4. I like playing the more of that 1 sus shape. So instead of this, you've got something cleaner sounding like this. Just a bit more open, and I like how that sounds in a mix. For a 5 chord, you've got a couple choices. If this was our true 4 chord, you can move that up 2 steps and you'll get a 5 chord. Or you can go back down to your 1 position and then go down to this 5 shape, which is really more of a 5/7, but it works over either. So all we're doing there is taking the 1 and moving it down to that 7 note. On the G, the note is going from the major third to the 2 note. And the 5 is staying in the same position. So we're going from this to this. This shape is also really cool because you can do a couple of 6th shapes. And so we'll show that right here. You would start on your 1 position. Let's say you had a 4 come up. And then you can walk up to the 5. And then a 6. And sometimes for the 1, just to give it a little bit of flair, I like to add that 2 note up top. So if we have this A on the high E string, just moving that 2 steps into a B. And that gives this effect, going from this to this. So that's kind of an outline of shape number 1. Let's jump into a song and see how that's used in a full mix. All right, let's go ahead and jump into shape number 2. This one's going to be rooted more around the D triad. If you just play a normal D chord, we're going to take those top 3 strings, and that'll determine where we kind of base this shape out of. So here's the shape we'll be working with, just to kind of find where we're at. So let's play that D shape. And the way that I usually find these shapes is that I know my B string, the open B string, is going to be a perfect octave up here at the 12th fret. And so I know that that same shape for the key of B is going to be up here. So since we're in the key of A, let's just go ahead and move that down 2 whole frets. Lots of fun stuff you can do in that shape, but we're actually going to work with more of a mid-range voicing. So let's take that shape we had and not worry about the high E. So we've got this, the G and the B strings. And now we're going to add the low major third right down here. And that's going to be an A major as our 1 chord. And so again, in the key of A is our 1. If we go to a 4, you can do that one of 2 ways. The more standard way would be this. So that would be a more standard 1 to 4 voicing. When I'm using these triads, I like to kind of lock down and only change notes on 1 or 2 strings at a time, so you kind of maintain that consistency throughout the song section or whatever you're playing. So instead of that true 4, I would do, again, more of a 1 sus. So I'm going to take that 3 note on the bottom, on the D string, and just add 1 fret to it, so I'm up on the 12th fret. And you can hear how that would work over the basic progression of A to D. All right, so there's our 4 voicing. When we're working with the 5 chord, this is actually really easy. So if we want to come to the 9th fret and anchor down on the D, G, and B strings, we can apply that position again. And all we're going to do to get to the 5 chord is just lift off our middle finger and our ring finger. So we go from the 1 to the 5 like this. So we added a 4, that 1 sus there and at the end, but you can see how easy that gets to navigate once you lock down into that position. For the 6 minor, you can kind of cheat and get away with it, but you can play this exact, the 1 voicing over the 6 if you want a more open 6 sound. So just imagine that over the A. And now imagine that with the F sharp in the bass. So you're not playing a true 6 minor, but it works. And the way that I try to play my 6 chords is to actually have them sound as little of a minor sound as I can. So I try to play them a little bit cleaner and just let the chord kind of imply that I'm playing the 6 minor. But if you want to play a true 6, you would just add on the G, you would go from fret 9 to fret 11. And I should add as well that for the 2 chord, which is also a common move in worship music, you can just use that same 1 sus voicing, and that'll work over the 2 as well. Again, it's not a true 2 minor, but it sounds super clean and works really, really well. Let's go ahead and jump into the last shape, shape number 3. This one is going to come directly from our A power chord shape. So since we're working in the key of A, let's go ahead and find that A power chord. It's going to be right down here. And so all we're going to be worrying about for this triad is those top 3 strings. So if the bass is playing the root note, then we don't really need to worry about that. So we're going to find our triad right there. This is probably the tightest or punchiest sounding inversion of these 3. Again, the first one is going to be more neutral, can kind of work everywhere. The second one with that major third on the bottom is going to be the thickest, just of harmonically how that works. And this last one, position number 3, is going to be the punchiest, get more of that rock-driven sound. Elevation used these a lot back in the day when they had that kind of more that rock sound as their signature sound to their band. So let's jump into why these work and how we can find them. So like I said, you can find these just based on that A power shape. So if we were working in the key of A, but let's say we wanted to work in the key of D or find the same shape in the key of D, all we have to do is look for where that D note lives on the A string, which is up here on the 5th fret. So if we just extend that into the power chord, now we've got our triad on the 7th fret, barring the D, G, and B strings. So this shape is probably the most versatile as far as how many voicings you can pull from it. If we want a basic 4 chord, all we have to do, since we've got the 5th on the bottom, let's go back to the key of A actually. Since we've got the 5th on the bottom, the 1 in the middle, and the major third on top, all we have to do to get to a 4 chord is take that top string, that B string, and add 1 fret to it. So now we're fretting the 4 note on top. Again, not a true 4, but in a mix that sounds really, really good, and it cuts and it just sits perfectly in the mid-range. If we're looking for a 5 chord, there's a lot of different ways we can play that. The way I would play it is kind of take that shape from the 4 and just take these 2 notes up 2 frets. And leave that D string exactly where it is. So that sounds something like this. If we go 1, 4, 5. then back to the 1. There's a lot of ways, obviously, like I said, you can play that. You can come down from here. The 5 chord in the key of A is going to be E, and so then we can just take this shape, and then we've got a 5 chord. For the 6 chord, all we do is take this 5 note on the bottom and move it 2 frets so it becomes a 6 note. You can also find another version of the 4 chord and 5 chord by moving both the low string and the high string. So if we go a 1, 4, 5 this way, and that kind of ties together the whole thing. You can actually see how these chords move and work together, because even though these are 3 different starting places for these triads, they actually all tie together across the fretboard. So if we take this 3rd position and do what we just did, that 1, 4, 5, and we're going to stay in the key of A the whole time. So let's stay on that chord for a second. If we remember right, this is actually a way we can play the 5 chord in position 1. So we're actually right next door to the 5 chord, or to the 1 chord in that first position. And now we're at ground 0 for position 1. And then you can play that exact same thing, a 1, 4, 5 in position 1. And there's position 2. So the way that that works is we just pay attention to what our bass note is. So in position 1, our bass note, or the lowest note, is going to start on the 1. If we take that and walk up the major scale, there's position 2 with the major 3rd and the bass. And then if we keep walking on up, we'll do the octave of it this time. But if we walk up, if we've got the 3 and then the 4 and the 5, now we're in position 3, an octave up from down here. So what's great about these 3 shapes is they sound great on their own, but you can mix and match anytime you want, given on what the song is. So that just gives you a ton of mobility and visibility on the fretboard, and allows you to play creatively and know where your spots are going to be, regardless of where the song goes. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and checking out the video today. Hopefully you learned something. I have a huge passion for teaching stuff about guitar and seeing other people grow and what they get to do week in and week out. If you liked the video, it helped me out a ton. If you liked and subscribed, that means a ton to me. We've got a couple more playthrough videos on the way. We'll keep doing those, as well as a couple longer, maybe theory or tone videos on the way too. So hopefully you'll stick around and check out some of those when they come out. We'll see you next time.